are they digesting fat optimally? To get those nutrients, break down the food and get the nutrients from the food for the hormonal cascade that happens in our body. So from a gut health perspective, is very important, that is often overlooked. And it's one of my key components besides that stress, sleep, lifestyle perspective of supporting hormones.
Welcome to the Fire, Soul, and Grace podcast. I'm Dr. Kristi Tompkins, functional medicine practitioner and transformational coach. If you are looking to up-level your health in body, mind, and spirit, scale your business, improve your relationships, and create a life you love, you are in the right place. Every other week, we'll bring you a topic and feature incredible guests worldwide. Be inspired and feel empowered to live your life with greater joy, meaning, and purpose. I'm excited you're here. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the Fire, Soul, and Grace podcast. I'm Dr. Kristi Tompkins, and today I am really excited for my guest today. This is Dr. Jennifer Bunzenmeyer, Naturopathic Medical Doctor, who is currently based in Canada. And we are going to talk about all things related to women's health, women's hormones, perimenopause, and whatever else comes our way and whatever we feel like talking about. So I want to welcome you to the show, Jennifer.
Thank you, Dr. Kristi. It's so exciting to be here. I love the avenue. Thanks for having me on. The avenue of sharing education about perimenopause. So awesome.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things that I didn't actively pursue when I was in school. I don't know when you graduated, but I've always had an interest in women's health, just because of my own health issues. But over time and working with certain doctors and certain mentors, and then of course I'm in my 40s, so I'm kind of going through the changes as well. It's just one of those topics that is so essential, and there's a lot of information out there online, and there's a lot of conflicting information. So I love that you and I and so many others are able to make better sense of perimenopause. So tell me a little bit more about you and your background, how you got started with naturopathic medicine, your career.
I have been a naturopathic doctor for about 20 years. And I have had a strong passion to work with women in women's health. I went to school. I remember I was thinking about this as I was walking my dog this morning. I did a women's health minor when I was doing my science degree. I've always been really interested in supporting women in their health. And I would say that's gotten even stronger as I've gotten into my 40s. And wanting to really get the message out that there's so much that can be done in our 40s for our healthcare. So it's a strong passion. I am in Calgary, Alberta. I'm a naturopathic doctor registered in Alberta, and I've been here my entire practice. I have a full-time practice. Interests include everything from walking my cute little mini Labradoodle dog that has me wrapped around her paw, to Pilates, cooking, hiking in those Rocky Mountains. We're really close to Banff here in Calgary as well.
Oh, nice. That sounds beautiful. All of it, the dog, the hiking, the close to the mountains, the cooking. So what are some of the things that, with perimenopause, as you know, there's women that are affected on a physical level and an emotional level, and every woman's very different in what she experiences and when she experiences these symptoms. What are some of the things that you are seeing in your practice, in your office, with regard to perimenopause that you feel like women should know more about?
Yes, absolutely. So women are coming in, they're knowing that something is off from a physical symptom-wise. They're just feeling that shift in those hormones. So they're either experiencing more PMS, that's like more pronounced, like mood swings, irritability, breast tenderness, heavier flow usually, sometimes lighter flow. And difficulties with sleep can be part of it as well during PMS, or maybe there's stress there as well that's promoting that through the month too. So they're knowing there's a shift happening, but they're questioning, I'm only 42 or 40. How can this possibly be happening at this place? So that's where I'm passionate about getting that education out. So that's the physical aspect. Do you have anything you wanted to add before I go into the emotional? Like, I mean, there's so much to chat about.
Oh gosh, yeah, we could talk for hours on this topic. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a woman is in her early 40s. I would say that there are some women who start to experience these symptoms in their late 30s. And what's really interesting about hormone changes, as I mentioned a little bit ago, it can happen at different times. And for some women, they do naturally go through, quote, naturally go through an earlier menopause. For a lot of women, I typically tell them it usually ranges between 35 and 55. I mean, you could be, I've treated women in their early 50s and they're still having a period. I mean, there might be some other symptoms going on that are related to hormones dropping, but for some women I've treated, their period stops at 40. So there's different variations there. But I think for a lot of women, they think it's related to something else. I think sometimes there's that, I don't want to call it denial, because I think it's a beautiful ignorance. What's the saying? Ignorance is bliss. Like, I think a lot of women don't understand that I'm feeling more stressed. I'm feeling my sleep is not quite as deep. I'm gaining a few pounds. Oh, it must be because I am eating more. I'm exercising less. I have a lot more on my plate. And yes, it could be all those things too, but it also could be just that the hormones are starting to fluctuate and change. And therefore, that's why they're having those symptoms and they're more sensitive to it. What do you think?
Yes, that's a really good point and perspective in the sense of um, definitely late 30s. I've seen the same thing. Mid 30s, progesterone can start to decrease. And then I've seen women 56 years old and still having a period. So it's like across the board. And I think that is true. I think women are busy, that they're thinking that it's stress and they're not realizing that it's a hormonal shift. And so it's a good point in the sense of pointing to how we're like a private investigator trying to figure out what the issue is and what the underlying issue is. Is it stress, or is it that we're seeing a shift in hormones? So I see myself as a private investigator of the body, trying to listen to each woman's symptoms, which are so they're often the same, but there's always nuances that makes that woman individual.
Yeah, I love the term private investigator or investigator. Well, it is private because you're confidential with with a woman. Right. But I love that. I just recently did a little Instagram reel on just the lab testing for perimenopausal women, and the labs, I know you order labs like I do, and sometimes the labs, they're very essential and they can show information that sometimes even surprises me. Sometimes they're normal and it surprises the client or the patient. And a lot of times it doesn't match the symptoms. And that's the whole beauty of coming to a naturopathic doctor, a functional medicine doctor, is that we can evaluate the person, as an individual, and look at the symptoms, compare it with the labs, and sometimes they match and it's a reflection, and sometimes they don't. And it's really kind of looking at that holistic, comprehensive view, putting on that private investigator hat, so to speak, and really figuring out, okay, what's happening here based on what you're telling me and based on what we see on the data.
Absolutely. Yes. And there is always nuances. And that's the thing, is that every woman is individual, and she makes me think in a different way to really get in there and figure out what's happening for her compared to someone else. So individual healthcare is where we're at. And that's what I love about naturopathic medicine is that's what we're wanting to do.
Yeah, totally agree. What are some of the do you have a lot of women that come to you when their symptoms are just starting, or is it usually after they've been to several other doctors, or maybe they've been to, Dr. Google a little bit too much? They talk, we're women, we talk with our friends, we talk with our colleagues, our family members, like, hey, are you experiencing this too? So what are you seeing in your practice with regard to coming in to see you as far as like when they start seeking care or advice?
I think, Kristi, it is really across the board, depending on the woman. So we have that woman that is super busy and forgetting to go for her regular screening labs and mammogram and whatnot, and just doesn't have time to really look at this, to the women that are on Google or Instagram and they're like, something is shifting. What is happening? I think it's like a really across the board of like, I think Instagram and all the research that's at our fingertips now has made women more aware, if they have the time and the resources to actually go there for themselves. A lot of times they don't have that time. So we see them further along in their journey. My hope is that we can catch them early on, because early prevention is key in supporting health, I feel.
Yeah, 100% for anything, but especially for perimenopause for sure. What are some of the things that you are seeing that exacerbate perimenopausal symptoms for women? Like, what are some of the worst offenders, so to speak?
The triggers, yes, for sure. So I really like stress is a huge offender in the sense of the more stress and the more we're taking on, there's that cortisol response that's happening. And so as we're starting our journey into perimenopause, which by the way is a 4 to 8 year process, we call it the perimenopause transition period of a 48-year process, our progesterone is starting to decrease. And so at the same time, I often find that women are in their 40s or late 30s going into 40s, and they've really built their career, or they've taken on lots of I call them the COO of the household if they're at home with kids. And stress is very prominent, and that can totally trigger headaches, insomnia, hot flashes. It can perpetuate those perimenopause symptoms that are already starting to come out as that progesterone is lowering. So I think it's a big one. But then it's also that cortisol aspect and blood sugar dysregulation aspect that stress can perpetuate as well, which the hormonal shifts that are happening are already putting us into more of that. This is more later on 40s where we can get into that insulin resistant stage or higher cholesterol, that kind of thing. Two things. I mean, I could keep going.
Oh yeah,
I'll give you
I know.
time in here.
Lots to say here. What are some of the things that you are, as being a naturopathic doctor, we have a lot of amazing tools and resources and therapies that we could recommend to women, a whole assortment. And that's what I love about this medicine is we get to kind of pick and choose based on that female, based on what she needs, personally individualized care. What are some of the things that you like to recommend to women across the board from a naturopathic medical perspective that you have found over the years that works extremely well for helping women lessen these symptoms?
Good question. So I think it's about, let's take a step back in the sense of what is happening and looking at some preventative things. So primary is from a lifestyle perspective, diet and exercise is key. So if our blood sugar is unbalanced in our diet, it's going to totally affect those symptoms along with stress. So, and I always say that if we know why we're doing something, it's a way more inspirational or motivational instead of the shoulds of diet. I shouldn't have that cake. I shouldn't have that extra piece of toast or whatnot. And so that's where you and I are trying to help educate them around balancing their blood sugar with diet, because that can help their sleep. If their sleep is off, PMS time, that diet becomes very important. If they're having a hard time with weight gain, diet becomes really important. And so it's looking from that perspective. Exercise as well. So all those lifestyle things, I think, is very supportive in this era. And then stress management is another key. Like, self-care is key in this stage, which often goes unchecked because we're still caring for others around us and we're not giving ourselves that self-care that we need. So I would say those are the two prominent things, is from a lifestyle perspective, is diet and that self-care and exercise.
And you bring up such a good point, and this is something that I think is very common for women of all ages, not just women in their 40s, but women that are younger. Maybe things are shifting a little bit now, because I think younger women are waiting a little bit longer to get married and start families. But as far as like caring for others and making sure everybody else, I just spoke with a woman this morning who she's now almost an empty nester. 2 of her kids have moved away. She's got one in high school, but when you're in high school, you don't want to have a whole lot to do with your parents. So she's going through perimenopausal changes, and she's feeling like a little bit kind of lonely and flat. I mean, she has her daughter, she's got her husband, she has a business that she runs, but there's a lot of now all of a sudden she has a lot more open space and a lot more open time. And so therefore she does have the time, but for some women, it's really hard to focus, or really difficult to focus on self-care and really giving back to yourself. What would you say to a woman who is struggling with really giving herself that self-nurturing, self-compassion, self-love, self-care that she really needs, especially during this time?
Yes, exactly. So valid points. I think that self-care, I look at it as I equate it to the analogy of we need to put the oxygen mask on ourselves before we can put it on anyone else. And we want to be there for the people around us. And the best way that we can do that is if we do the self-care. Because if we're in that more reactive state and impatient with our kids, and I mean teenagers, we're dealing with teenagers that, I mean, there's a whole host of things there. We need a lot of patience. And which requires self-care. So it's giving yourself permission for that self-care. Like, that is like number one supportive thing. And taking a step back and going, yeah, this is not selfish. This is an important piece for me and my family and those people I'm touching in the world every day.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point. It is not selfish. It is, like you just said, when you can fill your own cup, you can give more to others. Jennifer and I are in a mastermind group together with a business coach who we both adore. And we've learned a lot about not only supporting ourselves, or not only, creating a successful practice or helping ourselves in our personal life, but also focusing on making sure that our needs are met as well. Because when you feel like you are giving to yourself and have that self-love, self-compassion, I know there's different terms for it, you have so much more to give to others. You're filling your own heart, you're filling your own cup, but you can give so much more to others. And it really is a win-win. And for a lot of women, and I think for men too, men, they tend to be givers and very generous as well in different ways. But it's really understanding that I do have to support myself so that I can not only give to other people, but I still have some left in my cup. instead of feeling depleted and burned out and run
Yeah,
down and getting sick and getting stressed and making our perimenopausal symptoms worse. It really is that cognizant checking in with ourselves, like, oh, I need, like you mentioned Pilates a little bit ago, I need to go to my Pilates class or my yoga class, or go have lunch with a girlfriend, or just go for a walk and be out in nature and just take a break for an hour of my time or 30 minutes of my time. It's that constant reminder that we need to check in with ourselves constantly.
absolutely. Yes. Yes. And I would add to that, oftentimes we're seeing these women in that very stressed place, high cortisol, waking them up in the middle of the night and hard to fall asleep, plus that progesterone going lower. So their foot is on the gas pedal, but their gas tank is drained. And so it's what can we do to help uh, pull that foot off the gas pedal, respect their personality. And if they're doers and they like to be busy, how can we maybe add in some relaxation or some self care, but not be totally taking away the doing, but it's more pulling your foot off the gas pedal, conserving gas is the analogy I use.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that. I know in my practice I have a naturopathic medical license for California, and I do a lot of hormone prescribing. I've been prescribing hormones since I first started in practice. I learned a lot about that through one of my doctor mentors that I learned from over 15 years ago. Bioidentical hormone prescribing, herbal supplements, of course, nutrition. What are besides, of course, the essential self-care, stress management, piece to alleviating symptoms? What are some other things that you have found? You don't need to get specific with brands necessarily, but what are some things that you have found on a physical level that have helped women lessen their symptoms?
Yes, yeah, good question, Kristi. I in the province of Alberta here, we don't have prescribing rights for HRT, so I refer them back to their doctor to have that conversation. But I'm looking more from the perspective of like early perimenopause, like I said, is more of a higher estrogen relative to the lowering progesterone. And so I'm doing more support from a liver detox perspective to giving nutrients for the liver to process that higher estrogen. We now know research has shown that there's certain nutrients that help with phase 1 and phase 2 detox pathways in the liver to help with that estrogen metabolism that's just normally part of what our body's wanting to do. We're just giving it a little nudge and a little bit of a support. And so I find when we give those herbs and those nutrients, things like DIM or calcium D-glucarate or sulforaphane from broccoli, that can really help bring down estrogen. So estrogen is more equal to progesterone. And just a word of caution, it really requires uh, a really knowledgeable eye on a person to know how long to do those herbs for, because it's easy to bring estrogen down too much. And then women are not happy because their memory and their concentration is really low as well. So that's where I'm always suggesting see a naturopathic doctor or a functional medicine practitioner or somebody who knows about these herbs. But that is something that I find works really well in that early, when a woman is in that higher estrogen place of heavier periods, possible fibroids, water retention, weight gain. It's harder to lose weight. It's hard to put an age on this because just like you said, this could be as early as 38. This could be more 42, 45 years old. But then if a woman doesn't have a period, or they have a period till 56, maybe they don't start going through this until they're 47, 48. So it's all dependent on what stage they're at in that perimenopause transition.
Yeah, and you bring up something really important. You and I know this as going through our program and studying Obviously the human body and women's health. With regard to hormones, the liver is such an important organ for
Yeah.
not only, detoxification purposes for everything that the body comes into contact with, but it also is essential for metabolizing. It's the main organ that helps metabolize our hormones. And so our hormones, our body produces it, but it's constantly breaking it down into different forms, into another form, into another form. And then finally, our body uses what it can and it excretes the rest. It excretes the rest in urine, it excretes the rest in our stool, like our body, and then our body creates more. And then, of course, as we are going through the perimenopausal years, the ovaries aren't producing as much, but the liver still has to metabolize process those hormones. But it brings me back to the crucialness of the liver itself. So if we are eating processed foods, pro-inflammatory foods that don't really have a whole lot of, they're not nutrient dense, they're filled with whatever. I mean, I had this conversation with a lot of people, a lot of my clients lately, like our grocery stores today are massive. Like, look at all the different possibilities of foods we have. And yes, we've got our produce section, the fruits and vegetables, and we do have some, quote, kind of healthy foods in the middle of the aisles, but there's a lot more man-made food chemicals out there that people often choose, or it's maybe takeout or restaurant or fast food. But then you add in things like alcohol, medications, recreational drugs, pollution. You add all these other things and then of course stress, stress, as we know, will affect every organ, including the liver. We add all these other components to our body, and the liver is like, whoa, this is a lot to process. This is a lot to break down and metabolize in addition to the hormones. And so having a woman that maybe is more estrogen dominant, but the body can't really break it down because the liver is so congested and inflamed.
Yes, exactly. And it's and not from a conventional standpoint, lab work, liver enzymes are fine, or maybe they're not, but oftentimes they're fine. It's more that naturopathic medicine is more sensitive, I say. We're trying to help support the system, give it a nudge so that it can do a better job at these things, because it is inundated with these different toxins that are in our environment and things like that as well. So really good point at looking at the, again, lifestyle aspect of what could be impacting the liver. And so we can look at that as well.
Yeah. And sometimes you can do a chem panel and look at the liver enzymes and the gallbladder and maybe do a lipid panel, which cholesterol is made in the liver. We can do that, but sometimes as I mentioned earlier, sometimes the lab data isn't always matching the symptoms. And so if somebody is having heavier bleeding, fibroids, maybe more PMS symptoms, maybe fibrocystic breast, there's a whole, maybe migraines. Again, we kind of have to look at the symptoms and not just the lab values to see. We need to support her liver and the gut, obviously the liver and the gut too. And there's so many beautiful herbs that can be recommended, either in tincture. I don't know if you're more of a tincture person or a capsule version, or God, even foods like you mentioned a little bit ago. Like our diet includes a lot of naturally cleansing and purifying, supportive, nourishing foods that can support the liver, of course. How much nutrition do you, because you mentioned cooking a little bit ago, and of course you're a naturopathic doctor, so I'm assuming that you have a pretty vast knowledge of nutrition. How much of that do you incorporate into your practice?
Yes, like nutrition is a mainstay, right? Like supplements is kind of, if our nutrition's not where we need it to be, which I'm working with each person where they're at. So if they're super busy and they can't do all this cooking, like we break it down and we try to figure out a solution that will work in their lifestyle. But nutrition and what we fuel our body with really impacts our hormonal health, but just our health in general. So it's definitely a mainstay that I definitely want to look at. So I think nutrition is like key for our health as one of the lifestyle principles, essentially.
Yeah.
Totally. And then the other piece of that that you mentioned is let's expand not just into the liver, but gut health is so important from a hormone perspective as well. So it's one of my main pillars of care when I'm looking at hormone support and regulation, because the hormones do get processed through the liver, but then they often will go into the feces. And if there's the microbiome is off balance, then that is going to affect estrogen metabolism as well. So, and if there's more inflammation in the gut, that's going to affect our hormones as well. So, I'm often looking at or screening for what's called SIBO, so small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, and then looking at digestive function, like simple things like stomach acid, and do they have enough stomach acid, and are their pancreatic enzymes up to where we need them to be? Are they digesting fat optimally to get those nutrients, break down the food and get the nutrients from the food for the hormonal cascade that happens in our body? So from a gut health perspective is very important, that is often overlooked. And it's one of my key components besides that stress, sleep, lifestyle perspective of supporting hormones.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the hub. I always relate to the gut as kind of a tree trunk, like it's a tree trunk that just has deep roots, and then you've got all these like branches that branch off to the different body systems, and that trunk and the roots need to be really healthy and nourished and get plenty of nutrients and water and sunlight, and not having any kind of diseases that tend to infect trees. Like, you need that to be healthy so the rest of the body can flourish, and really supporting that through healthy diet, but also the exercise piece. I mean, I think the exercise piece is really important. And yes, you can be quote regular movement through your diet, but the exercise, especially for perimenopausal women who maybe they are more busy, they've got family, they've got jobs, they've got lots of activities, maybe aging parents, and a lot of times their exercise, that's where the self-care comes in. The exercise tends to get the back burner, and they don't exercise as much. I mean, I hear this a million times, like, oh yeah, I used to exercise all the time, or I try to exercise 5 days a week, but it ends up being like maybe one. And that will affect their gut health, the regularity of that. And so if there's a congestion or somewhat of a backup there, that's going to affect their not only their gut microbiome, but also their hormones as well.
Absolutely. Yes. And it's pointing towards how lifestyle is such an important piece that's often overlooked. Exercise, diet, stress management, sleep, all of those things that are just sometimes very difficult. And it's just maybe picking one or two things and just trying to highlight getting those into your lifestyle maybe a little bit more. If you can't get to the gym, go for a walk. Just make it as simple as possible just to get some movement in. I always say break it down one step at a time.
Yeah. I always say 30 minutes or 20, 30 minutes is better than 0 minutes, right? Like you don't have to join a gym. I mean, I think since the pandemic, which of course is,
we've realized, yes,
you can do anything at home. Like there's lots of YouTube workouts, there's lots of apps, of course we can stream things to our TV now in our living room. I think there's lots of possibilities that are free that you can do that not only help with your weight, but of course, weight management, or fat gain tends to be a bit more prominent for a lot of perimenopausal women, less muscle strain, interrupted sleep, stress, mood. So exercise is one of those, I think, really essential pieces that really addresses a lot of different things for women. And it's reminding them, because I think we all know, oh yeah, I need to eat healthy and exercise, but I think it's that kind and loving and kind of nudging, encouraging recommendations that we can give to our clients that helps them say, oh, that's right, I need to get back into doing that, because I used to love yoga, I used to love to hike, I used to love to go to my cycling class, or whatever it happens to be. It's just that reminder.
And also, I just want to put a plug in for bone health,
Yeah.
which is often overlooked, and we do not think about this until we're in our 60s. And bone health is a concern at this point, and osteoporosis is coming up. Um, we actually start losing bone really early, like in our 30s. And so exercise is key for maintaining bone health. So I'm just putting a plug in there. Now that I'm in my late 40s, even I am treating my bone health personally different. And I'm going, I need to really educate women who are late 30 or all 30s and 40s how important bone health is, because I have women coming in their 60s and they're frantic. Their bone mineral densities come back, osteopenic. What can I do? And so exercise is key. And this is that whole piece of, if we know why we're supposed to do these things, I shouldn't even say that word and watch my language, but if we know why, we're more apt to be motivated to do these things and incorporate them in our lifestyle.
Yeah, the why is so, and that's with anything, that's so important because when women understand, we're part of our job is being a teacher. Docere means to teach. So
Yeah.
part of our job is to educate, teach people that this is why you are exercising. This is why you're eating healthy. This is why you're taking this supplement. This is why you are I recommend practicing meditation. Like these are why the things, because physiologically, anatomically, emotionally, this is what's going to help your body. And when you explain it to them in the way that makes sense, they're like, oh, okay, I got it. And with this type of medicine and this type of care, we get to spend more time. I am fortunate in that I am not a conventional doctor. I never wanted to be. And I would hate to have to rush through appointments for 10 or 15 or 7 minutes to be able to try to get into to influence somebody about what to do, because you simply can't do that in a short amount of time. But we are fortunate in that we do have more time to spend with people to really educate them on the why. And I do think the why is absolutely helpful for allowing them to make changes.
Yes, agree, totally. Big thing.
Yeah. You mentioned something a little bit ago about memory and focus and mood. And that's something that, yes, we know women tend to gain weight and they're maybe more stressed and maybe they're not sleeping as well. And maybe you throw in some night sweats and low libido. But from an emotional, psychological perspective, I think that's one of the things that really takes a lot of women by surprise, more so than maybe some of the other more concrete physical symptoms, like I'm having trouble focusing. I can't seem to remember that person's name, or why did I walk into this room, or I'm having trouble stabilizing my mood. I feel like I'm kind of swinging up and down a little bit too much. How often do you see that?
Oh my goodness, Dr. Kristi, so often. It is a common thing that is put on our intake forms of low memory and concentration and low focus. Some women start to question if they're ADHD at this place. Usually we see this, I would say, if I had to generalize, maybe a little bit later on in the perimenopause transition, as that estrogen is starting to decrease, because usually this is the estrogen is a little bit responsible for this. Although thyroid too, I'm always screening from that perspective, because that could decrease memory and concentration too. So it's a very common thing. And then from a mood perspective, so much from that perspective. So that low progesterone, which is earlier on, progesterone's anxiolytic, it calms us down. So if we have less progesterone, then we can start to feel more anxious, more irritable, less impatient, or more impatience, because of those shifts in progesterone. So it's, again, listening to where the woman is at to figure out where we need to work with them and what we need to do from a support perspective. But it's a very common thing.
Yeah. And yeah, I see it all the time. And again, it's one of those, Oh, I think it's related to stress. So it's related because I have too many things on my plate right now, but it really is the hormones. The estrogen piece is really important. And one thing I want to mention is that estrogen, it gets a bad, there's a lot of misconceptions about
Mm,
estrogen and how, oh, it causes this disease or this cancer or that causes this, and too much estrogen is bad. But on the flip side,
right.
not enough estrogen is actually just as detrimental to women's bodies. From a physical perspective, it affects our skin, right? The moisturization and the collagen
Exactly.
and elastin for our skin. It affects of course, our sexual desire. It affects our joints, our muscles, but it really affects our brain in a way that when that starts to drop, it's not just I'm having hot flashes. It really does affect the neurotransmitter production, the ability to
Yeah.
focus. You mentioned thyroid. Cortisol is also one of those things that helps with so many different things, as you and I know, but just with focus as well. And then if you've got too much cortisol or fluctuating erratic cortisol, not enough estrogen, that can lead to this um, kind of cognitive feeling of, God, I feel like I'm losing my mind, right? That's
Yes,
one
and a
of,
lot of brain fog, and that depression is more prominent and
mhm.
more susceptible as that estrogen decreases because it does affect serotonin
Mhm.
levels as well.
Mhm.
So definitely makes an impact in our mental health
Yeah,
as well.
for sure.
And then again, from the bone health perspective, estrogen is responsible for building bone. So in menopause, when our estrogen is decreasing, that's when we get more bone loss as well. And then more cardiovascular risk as well, because it's increasing our cholesterol and the potential of atherosclerosis and insulin resistance and putting us at more risk of diabetes as well.
Yeah, and that's again, it's a whole body perspective, the exercise,
Mhm.
the nutrition piece, stress management, as we all know. But also there's some really beautiful phytoestrogen, PHYTO, phytoestrogenic herbs that can help support. It's not the same as quite the potency as HRT, but there's a lot of phytoestrogenic herbs that can help support women's bodies
Yes.
without necessarily unnecessarily elevating her estrogen or giving her too much progesterone, but it can help with that balance so that her body, as a lot of women don't understand this or realize this, but past menopause or past that point where you're no longer having a period, your ovaries are, if, assuming you still have them, your ovaries are still producing a little bit of estrogen. Our adrenals produce some estrogen stored in our body fat. So our body is still getting some estrogen. It's not like it's completely void of that. But there's
Yeah.
some beauty and really nutrient rich phytoestrogenic qualities that women could take through herbs, but it's knowing the right ones to take.
Right.
And as you and I know, there's lots of different
Mhm.
products out there, but it's really finding those pearls, those products that help women with their symptoms.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. And I also find from a mental health perspective, mitochondria support.
Yeah.
The research is now exploding about
Mm-hmm.
anti-aging, which I like to say aging gracefully,
Mm-hmm.
support that we can give the system and mitochondria support. There's tons of research out there on nutritional supplements and diet things that we can do from a mitochondria support to help with brain health, cognitive function, uh, as well as aging.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely essential mitochondrial support. And again, that comes back to the basics of what we can
Yes,
provide, what we can recommend to people to help support that human body in front of us or
exactly.
virtually at the cellular level, because when that works well, everything else seems to work so much better.
Absolutely.
So,
Yes.
as we are kind of wrapping up, what are like, I just want to know a little bit more about, like, a little bit more about you on a personal level. I know you said you love to cook, you like
Yeah.
Pilates, you like to walk your dog. Like, what are some other things that you do to help with stress management or to help you live a
Oh,
healthier life that helps balance you in a way that allows you to show up more present to your clients and your life.
Absolutely. So I think from a mindset perspective, it's really, I've learned to be a lot more compassionate with myself. So I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I always say I would never want to go through my 20s and 30s again from all that I have learned. And I'm fully accepting where I'm at in my 40s and with the experience I've gained. And part of that is shifting my perception and allowing myself to relax more. I've come to a place of really trying to not be reactive and more in a place of accepting who I am and my authentic self, which I love working with other women on as well. And I find that stress management piece, like I can't tell you how much that affects the stress management piece, because a lot of times it's our internal reaction to the stress versus how stressful the event is. Not that I'm negating that some things are very stressful for people and everyone is different. But the more I've worked on myself from that holistic mindset perspective, I feel like that has been a really big shift for me personally in how I react to stress.
I think that's beautifully said. I think the mindset piece it's essential. And I know it's a very trending, popular subject today, but how you think about things or how you perceive or how you reframe or how you approach life in any capacity, your business, your relationships with yourself. I think it's so important to, like I said earlier, to kind of bring yourself back into check and just like, okay, like, was that response really valid? And do I need to be that harsh with myself or with that, or overreact to that situation in that way? And I think you said aging gracefully a little bit ago, like just the grace with ourselves, the forgiveness of, I don't have to be perfect to get it all done. I don't have to get it right the first time. I think one of our mentors talks about, failing forward. Just, like if you fail, it's not really failure. You just have data. You just have information like, okay, I either won't do that again or I'm going to do it differently. I'm going to do it differently the next time and approach it from a place of wisdom, right? Like you said, I don't, other than maybe just the metabolism, I'd love to go back to my 20s, when you can eat anything and just like not get a lot of sleep, but still, get going the next day. And the recovery and the resiliency was so much faster, but the wisdom that you glean later in years is priceless. Yeah.
Totally.
So where can people find you? Like what are some online sources where people can find you, Jen?
Thanks for asking that question, Dr. Kristi. So my Instagram handle is Perimenopause Naturopath.
Perfect.
And that's also my TikTok handle, which I've gotten on as well.
Mm-hmm.
And my website is drjennbnd.com. So that's drjennbnd.com.
Well, it was such a joy talking with you today. I loved it, and I love talking about something that we share a passion for. And I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Kristi, for having me on. It's my pleasure to talk with you, and I hope that we've given some good education for women out there.
I think we have. Thanks, Jen.
Great. You're welcome.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are solely those of the host and the guest and are not intended to provide, nor are they a suitable substitute for professional care by a doctor, therapist, mental health professional, or other qualified medical professional. Thank you for listening to the Fire, Soul, and Grace podcast. Share this episode with someone in your life. Subscribe to this podcast so you can hear more valuable content on how to live your best life. Be sure to connect with us at firesoulandgracepodcast.com, and please join us in the next episode.